You're listening to Real Talk with Toya, Lex, and Chris. This is a podcast where we take the time to reflect, embrace our past, talk about life, or just sit back and laugh. You'll get a front row seat of what it's really like to be in our group chat. Let's start the show. Welcome to another episode of Real Talk with Toya, Lex, and Chris. I'm Toya.
I'm Alexis.
And Kristen is out today, but we have a special guest. We have Miss Tari that's gonna come in and share her lovely story that we can't wait to hear. But before we do that, we are going to do our Would You Rather. So Tari, would you pick a number between 1 and 100?
1 and 100. 79.
79.
Random.
Okay. Would you rather be the best at something no one cares about, or be slightly above average but nowhere near the best at something people care about?
My God, that's an interesting one. I guess it depends on if I like it. If I like it, but okay, I'm not gonna be deep. Because I'm sitting here like, well, what about me?
Right.
What do I like? So I guess the slightly above average one, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess.
What was it?
Okay, look, I gotta read it. Go ahead. Read it again. Would you rather be the best at something no one cares about, or be slightly above average but nowhere near the best at something people care about?
Yeah, I would say, I guess, slightly above average.
About something no one rarely. That's so many words.
It is. Like, I'm like, they could have did this different.
Okay, so almost like, would you rather be mediocre in something that nobody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm gonna say.
That's a tricky one.
I don't know. I think I'm gonna go slightly above average. I think. But nowhere near the best at something. Yeah, I think I'm gonna say that.
It's nowhere near the best that someone doesn't know anything about.
But nowhere near the best at something people care about.
So why is that even a conversation?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna say that one because I don't really be. I mean, I care about everything, but not.
You're right, because it's almost like, I like writing, but am I above average? I mean, do people care about writing? Do people, you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of like that's a tricky one. Good pick.
I just thought of 79, and that's just what I
I'm stumped on that one.
Like, I am too.
Y'all gonna choose?
Gonna
be the best?
No. I'm gonna sit on the bench with this one.
Be the best at something no one cares about.
How do you be the best at something no one cares about? Like,
yeah.
That's true, because if nobody cares about it, then who determines who's the best?
Who are you being measured against?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm gonna go with the one I said. I'm gonna be slightly above average.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna just go with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it probably sums up my life anyway.
Yep. Slightly above average. Okay, Lex, you want to? Well,
okay. Well, yeah. So, Tari, tell us a little bit about yourself, and a little bit of your story.
Okay, that's loaded.
It is very loaded. I didn't know how to narrow it in either.
Okay.
So I guess you could start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll try to narrow it down.
Okay. All right. Well, I consider myself a disciple of Christ. I am completely devoted to the Lord. I was not always like this. I have every reason to really not know who God is, to be honest with you, just because I didn't grow up in the church. But when I felt him starting to tug on my heart when I was like 18, I started to surrender some things, but not everything. And so I still had my fun, my BC days. I had a lot of fun, BC before Christ days. I had a lot of fun. I am not that Christian that's going to sit here and tell you I did not. But he was very patient with me and led me. And it took a lot of things to happen in my life for me to get to the point I am in with my relationship with God. And I realized that all along, that's kind of what he wanted. I know that he does not author evil, but he certainly used a lot of hard things that I had to experience to get me closer to him. So that's first and foremost about me. I love Jesus with all my heart. I love sharing him with the world. And I love that he's allowed me to get to know him personally for myself. Nobody taught me anything. I got to know him for myself. So that's first and foremost. As far as my career trajectory, I have a background in clinical psychology. I received my master's from Western Carolina University, and I received my bachelor's in psychology from Winston-Salem State University. So that's where I'm at. My career ambitions are to become a faith-based licensed therapist. So that is in the works right now. It has been a very long process and a very interesting process, and quite the testimony, but I trust God. I mean, that's all I have, as it relates to that. And I am the author of The Wilderness, Saved and Suicidal. And I'm not going to get into that yet, unless you guys want me to.
You don't have to.
Okay. What are some other things about me? I love to laugh. I love reading. I love writing. I am also a contributing writer for Mind Blowing Magazine. It's a faith-based magazine that features men and women of God and just what it looks like in different areas of life, such as like cooking and working out, and featuring some well-known celebrities and just hearing their stories. So that's also a part of my life. I love coffee. I love lots of coffee. But yeah, all around, I'm just like a tumbleweed. Wherever the wind blows, which Holy Spirit leads, that's the wind. That's where I'm going. Right now, I currently live in Raleigh. I did live in Charlotte. The Lord led me up here. So I'm staying with some family right now to try to get on the career path that I previously talked about. So yeah, that's a little about me.
All right.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very. One thing that you said, you said you was around 18. What, if you don't mind sharing, what was that pivotal moment that allowed you to surrender?
Yeah, I think of that as like kind of like the beginning of surrendering, because like I said, I did not surrender my life. Like I knew it was God because I started to have certain convictions about things that didn't really make sense because nobody was telling me to not do those things. At the time, I was dating someone and he was a believer, and the Lord actually used him to plant seeds in me. And I asked him a lot of hard questions like, well, why does God allow evil? Like, why do bad things happen? If he's God, why doesn't he stop certain things? And so it was around that time that I started to like just have questions. But what really led me to be more curious about God was this curiosity that I had for just like, okay, who exactly is he? Because even at a young age, like I would write letters to God. Like he really cultivated the gift of writing in me very young. And I would write letters to him. I don't really know why, but that's just what I did. And I know that was his leading. But I didn't understand Jesus. Like I didn't understand like the connection. I didn't understand that at all. And so I started to also just have a lot of dreams that piqued my curiosity. I was dreaming things that were in the Bible I had never read. Yeah. So but even then, to be honest, I still was like, okay, well, I'm still gonna, have my fun. I mean, I was 18, like, and I was, I had college and, I wasn't wild, but I definitely did college things. So that was the beginning of surrender for me. Yeah.
Beginnings.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, 18 is one of those leaving the house from the parents and I'm stepping out into society with no necessary covering. So yeah, that is a interesting point to start getting those type of questions, like who is God?
Yeah.
Especially when you say you didn't come from that as a being your background.
No, yeah. I mean, my grandmother goes to church. I can count on maybe two hands how many times we went. But like, well, my grandmother, she goes to church, but I'm just talking about like my mom and like, my dad, like as a family. But I like, I wasn't raised in the church, you know what I'm saying? So it wasn't like I had this foundation of the word of God or this foundation of, where I should be convicted of certain things that don't align with him, or maybe that he's not pleased with, or just the fact that I should even prioritize a relationship with God. I didn't have any reason to really have that, that was very organically produced by God, I can honestly say.
So with that being said, in your relationship with God, how has that impacted your mental health?
Yeah, so I think that's the biggest, I guess, pivot, if you will, about my story, because for a couple different reasons. One, many people don't believe that if you're a Christian or if you believe in Christ, that mental health can actually coexist, or mental illness, I'll say, because mental health and mental illness are not interchangeable terms. But, mental health is what we have, and mental illness is when there's some sort of disconnect there. There's some pain, trauma, things like that. So in the church, I believe now it's becoming more common for people to talk about it. But as a whole, it's like, okay, well, pray it away. That's what I feel like that's the other extreme of it. That's not what happened with me. And it came together in such a beautiful way, because when I started to get to know God, I was almost upset because I didn't know the first things about him. Like, I knew Genesis, I knew Adam and Eve, and that's about it. I think I knew about whale. Like, I'm so serious. I didn't know anything. And so it was like, okay, I'm sitting here, this grown adult, and I'm just like, I don't know the first thing about even the basic stuff that everybody else knows. But what I came to find is that the Lord was very intentional about that part of my relationship with him, because I could have easily fallen into that false narrative of the cultural worldview of who God is, that says you should just pray it away. Christians, they don't suffer with mental illness. They don't suffer with suicidal ideation. That wasn't the case for me. The Lord, he showed me his heart very early on. He was with me. Although, yes, I was very intimate with the Lord, and I still am. I still had a process to walk out. And I think that's what makes my story such a anomaly, because it wasn't just that I dealt with the suicidal thoughts. I actually suffered suicide attempts. And that's just something that a lot of people are like, well, wait, don't you believe in God? Like, what happened there? But the thing is, the Lord is present in all circumstances, and there is no marker or measurement where he is not there. And so my relationship with God, I can honestly say, was the anchor that got me through what I went through. But I still had to use natural resources as it related to getting out of that dark place. And today, my relationship with God is still my anchor. I call him my anchor, because no matter what comes, what goes, I mean, I'm still flat-footed, standing, where I am. And so I think there's a lot of ways that I can talk about my relationship with God as it relates to my mental health. But I think that I grew to understand that his word was the truth, and that was what I was to lean on whenever I started to hear voices that were not his or mine. I can keep going about that, honestly. But
I mean, it's relatable.
It is.
When did you initially realize you were in a battle with, I don't want to forecast that you had a mental illness, but just in your mental health, when did you realize you were in a battle?
Yeah, I think that, I did have a mental illness. I'm not ashamed to say that. I very much so did get the diagnoses and everything like that. The thing is, and I talk about this in my book, there were things that were wrong as I was younger. Like, I didn't really have the language for it, but I knew I had some pretty dark thoughts. And I knew that when I was younger, I felt very heavy a lot of the time. And I thought it was normal. I thought it was just, something that people my age would go through. But that heaviness was from wounds of like rejection and loneliness, low self-esteem. I was always a heavier kid. Just things that as a child you grow up knowing are, part of just that time frame that you're in. But that those things are not things that just disappear. Like those are things that God has to touch. Otherwise, they will stay with you as you grow into adulthood. And so I think when I was younger, that was when I noticed it. And even when I was younger, I did experiment with self-harm at a very young age. But at that time, it was more of like a fad. And so it was something I was like, okay, well, let me try this. But I didn't really like continue it. I was like, I'm not understanding why I'm even doing this right now. But it did pop up later on. And I constantly found myself wanting to escape a lot. So started when I was younger. And then it popped back up when I was in my last years of undergrad, and it got very severe when I was in graduate school. And so what was happening was every time something else happened in my life that I did not perceive was for my benefit, I got worse and worse. But on the outside, I was very high functioning. And that's also a very big piece to my story. I had high functioning depression and I had high functioning anxiety. So I would walk around, and unless you had the Holy Spirit, you couldn't tell anything was wrong with me. Like you were just like, okay, she's got her stuff together. I was literally told that. And it was for a plethora of reasons. I was definitely in my adulthood when things got really bad. Yeah.
So with you saying high functioning, do you think that that came from your childhood, being able to, sometimes you don't have the necessary people to talk to about what you go through. So you do, push it down, you regress it or whatever. And then you learn to just be like, okay, that's just, like you said, it's just something that you go through. And as you get older, you know it's there, but it's like you still have goals, you still have things you want to do, you still have dreams you want to achieve. And even not knowing how to express that, you just find yourself just coping with it. And it's just like, oh, okay. Yeah, I have depression, but I'm still going to class. I'm still doing this. Doing that. Do you think that's kind of where it rooted from, childhood?
I think that I learned that pattern of behavior early on. And I want to preface this by saying, I come from a very loving family. I come from a very, my mom is very supportive, but I often felt misunderstood. And I learned growing up as I got older that was nobody's fault, that they did the best they could. But because I did feel misunderstood, there was a lot that I really couldn't do. So I had to keep going, right? So like, of course, when you're in middle school, you don't really have a choice but to go to school. At least I didn't. And I was very academically gifted. I was smart. And then through high school, my mom, she did the best she could. I danced in high school. I dealt with a lot of anxiety with that just because I was not technically trained like other dancers were. And I was one of the only Black girls, and I was a thicker one, so it was a lot of stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it was stuff that I just had to kind of learn how to maneuver around. And so I definitely feel like that that mindset was already there, and it was something that was well established for when I got in college. And and I had an amazing college life, I really did, but I was using a lot of things to cope. And so it's like, on one hand, why am I drinking this much, as a college student? And I wasn't, drinking a lot, but there were certain moments where I just didn't want to be here. But then the next day, well, let's go to class. It's just like, it's whatever. And yes, that was definitely what I did in graduate school. I knew I was there to get my degree. I knew I was there and that nothing was going to stop me. I had an end goal. Like I said, I had support, I had friends, but that didn't take away what I was dealing with. So yeah, I definitely learned how to just kind of keep going. But at that time it was unhealthy. It wasn't necessarily endurance. It was just unhealthy because I wasn't dealing with it.
You were just coasting.
Yeah.
Do you think with some of the things that you already had going on, did that have any influence on the degree that you chose?
Most people would want, you know what, I've never been asked that, but I think a lot of people want to know. Like, to be honest, no. I chose my degree when I was in high school. I actually was going to pursue nursing, and I went through the CNA thing and everything, and I realized that was just not for me. I was going to pursue nursing because, you know, just the likelihood of me always having a job. But I always wondered what was going on in their minds. And so that's kind of what led me into pre-psychology when I went to undergrad. And, you know, I was just getting my feet in the door. But then later on in my later years of undergrad, that's when I became like, okay, I don't know if I want to teach. I don't know if I want to do research. I don't know if I want to practice, but with clinical psychology, you can do anything. So I knew I wanted to remain in psychology. I just didn't know what I wanted to do with it. But it wasn't because of what I went through, but I will say that somehow, some way, I was always the person people wanted to talk to. So that was something I think that might have piqued that interest, just kind of being the one that people go to, you know.
Our stories are so similar.
Really?
I feel like I'm looking in the mirror.
I'm just like, y'all have y'all moment. I'm like,
it's just almost. I was like, almost reversed though. Just like how her background has nothing to do with church and mine does, and then still to go through. So it's like, what? Yeah, it's interesting. So that is interesting. Never really talked to anybody else that could give the same thought process of what I went through, and then to hear it spelled out. Because, you know, a lot of times people don't like to be transparent about certain mental struggles that they have.
Yeah. Somehow, some way, I didn't struggle with being open about it.
Right.
I mean, or as far as like when I knew that God had called me to share my story, I didn't really struggle with overall any shame about it. There were certain details that I was like, that might be hard to hear. I can honestly say the only time that I felt apprehensive was knowing that my family would read it, and that they would see just how much pain I was in, and have to relive some of these moments. But I definitely feel like God established a grace in me to just kind of be open and vulnerable before I even knew I needed to do that. And I think that is for other people, because most people would not be so forthcoming about how I am with my story. And I'm very, very honest about it in my book. Very honest about it. Very like, right? Yeah, she knows I'm very honest about it. And so, but I think that that's what we need, because I've learned that those most transparent moments, that's when the Jesus comes in. Like, that's how you really honestly get to know him for who he really is. So yeah.
Very much so. It's just interesting, you know, how you were saying, like, just in the church, you get that concept of just pray it away. And that was just pretty much my whole life. And I'm just like, something still ain't right though. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I done prayed, but it's hello, can anybody answer these questions? And I think that's the important part that people need to understand, is just, you can pray all day, but you're still a human. You still live in a societal world that has a lot of gray areas that we as people are, I mean, we're vessels, we're products of Jesus, and we still have these questions, you know, and Jesus was there to be able to answer those questions to the people. We need that. So it was almost like, okay, I'm praying, but I still have a question.
Right.
Answer this. And that was a lot of my battle, was I couldn't get those answers. And it made me inward. You know what I mean? Like, I guess I just got to figure it out. And when you figure it out like that, you become your own teacher, and you can't do that when you're all in your head and living in your own world. So it's just, I think it's important that people do share and don't feel ashamed to share, because somebody out there too can relate and needs to hear that. Like, yeah, you can be a Christian, but you can still struggle with depression. You can still
Exactly.
struggle with anxiety. You can still
Mhm.
struggle with suicidal thoughts. It's
Mhm.
there. It happens. Now
Mhm.
help me to
Yeah.
understand why it's there, why
Yeah.
it happens, and how I can get over that hump.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
it doesn't go away. It doesn't
Mhm.
always go away. You just have
Mhm.
to. It's an everyday practice. It's like
Right.
how we have to practice daily walking in Christ. We have to practice daily walking with our mental health, and I think
Mhm.
it's important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so kudos to you for writing your book and being very transparent
Yeah.
in
Very transparent.
that. I'm gonna have to check it out now.
Yes, yes. I tell people all the time is this is not your cute, fuzzy devotional. It is not that. It can be a difficult read. And I definitely have seen the fruit of how transparent that the Lord has called me to be with the book. I've seen, I've really seen the fruit of it, because there's nothing there's nothing in there that he did not tell me to put in there.
Mm.
And of course there are some things that are not in there, but that's just from his strategy because I was completely an open book. But as far as just names and things like that, like I would never, but you really do get an up close view of somebody that has all these accolades and is a Christian and dealt with suicidal thoughts, and then it ended up leading to suicide attempts. And so that is actually in the book. Like that is what also makes the book so special, is because you don't read it from the other side. You read it as I'm walking through this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, I wasn't writing on the other side of it. I wrote through it. So
Mm-hmm.
it really is like real time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She literally has dates, like it's like journal entries in there, y'all.
Yeah.
Like it's like journal entries, dates, times, like, and some are like pages long, and some is just one sentence, like
Hmm.
literally, like it's
Oh
very
wow.
good, very good.
Do you often go back and reflect on it?
I used to. When I first released it, I did. It's interesting because I wonder, I was like, I wonder, do authors like go back and read their books? And if they do, how often? And then I recently thought about it. I was like, maybe I should just go back and, read it. But it's not something that I actively go back and reflect on. Obviously, I'm a content creator, so I do sometimes have to go back and pull things.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I can honestly say that every time I have to package it, I'm always in a place of being overwhelmed all over again. That the Lord really brought me out of that because I conveyed it as best as I could. I think it's conveyed pretty well of how much pain I was in. And I really did not think that I was going to make it out of that. I really didn't. I did not. And so even just as I'm looking at it right now, I'm still sitting here like, you can never tell me that Jesus isn't real. And
Right.
he definitely selected somebody that knew nothing about him really to attest to the fact that he is very real. Like this is not coming from a place of this is what I should have been doing, was leaning on the Lord. Like it's all I had. And it's not just all I had, that was really what I needed. And um I attended therapy and I was on a medication regimen for a little bit as well. And I'm very open about that as well. Like, I went through the whole process like anybody else would. Like I did not skip any steps. I was on medication, I was in therapy. But I can honestly say that if you would have taken out my relationship with God, I would not be alive.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I can say. So that for me personally, and I know that some people's stories are different, I could not have survived on just therapy and medication and even the support of people that love me alone. It wasn't enough. It was not enough. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm kind of that way with. I can't read my book. It's even hard for me to touch it because
Mm.
it reminds me of certain things that because you can visually see yourself back in those places as
Mm-hmm.
you read them, and like you said, God has worked with you through that, and that's a process. That's can be a lengthy process. Because it's almost like, oh my God, was that really my story? Did I really travel from A to Z, and this is all that came with it? And then you have a product of you putting it out there, and then you, like you say, you have to go back and be like, well, this is all through you, God. You led me here. You inspired this, so this is your product. This is me. This is my story.
Yeah, I tell people that all the time, that this is not my books. The Lord wrote this. I mean, there are definitely some things in there. I remember writing, and there were some moments where, many moments actually, where it would just come out of me like water, like whatever I was like, I was not using my brain. It was not me at all. And just the way that he was able to empower me to articulate whatever I was feeling, it was not natural. I can honestly say that was not a natural thing. It was very supernatural. And that's, to me personally, how I knew that I was within the will of the Lord to share my story. And again, I would, God, he's not the author of evil. He doesn't like pain. He doesn't, but he will do what he needs to do to get you closer to him. And I have learned that, and that's really all he wants. That's really all the Lord wants, is for us to be intimate with him. And I can say that, like, this is what he knew it would take from me, was when, I was at my end pretty much. So, yeah.
What are some things that you actively practice today to keep you, well, not to keep you, but when you have those hard moments or those hard spots in life, what are some things that you practice now?
It's funny, I just posted about this on my story or on my Instagram. I kid you not. Really? I made a whole post today, like, about what I do to maintain my mental health freedom, because that is something I walk in freedom. Like, I do believe that the Lord wants to comfort everybody, but I also believe that he wants his people free. And I'm a product of the fact that you can be free from this stuff. I know it's counter, but I can't negate the Jesus I know. So I can honestly say, though, that with walking in freedom, of course, there are moments that have come back up, and not just relevant to that area of my life, because I mean, a big part of it was a relationship that I was in. That was the cherry on top. But underneath that was what was already kind of festering that led to the suicidal ideations and hospitalization. But some things that I actively practice, like, one, I do not give myself or the enemy room to even get a foothold. So I'm very aware of what I can be triggered by. I'm very aware of my thoughts. I'm very aware of how I feel. And I'm very honest with myself about that. So I read my word. And even when I don't read it, because honestly, I don't care what saint it is or theologian, reading the Bible isn't always fun. It's not. And I can honestly say, like, I actually love studying the word of God, because I love words and I love, but and I had to understand, like, no, Tara, you don't have to get KJV because you can't understand that. So there's different translations that you can actually understand. So yeah, I enjoy studying the word of God, and I feed myself with the word. I talk to God daily. Like, I literally talk to God like I'm talking to you guys. Like, I don't get so caught up in the posture of prayer that I forget that it's just communication with God. So I'm constantly communicating with him from the moment I wake up, if I'm in the car. If anything happens during the day that I'm just not settled with, like, I'll just talk to God about it. I walk with God. Like, I really do walk with God. And like I said, this is a huge part of what keeps my mind in this place. I do not currently have a therapist right now, but I was in therapy prior to when I moved from Charlotte, and that was in August. And even during that time, that was years after, I was hospitalized. And so I am an advocate for staying in therapy, even though there's nothing adverse going on right then and there. So that was kind of like maintenance. Like, how you have, like, a car has maintenance and all that. Like, that's kind of what I do for myself. I'm very honest with my friends. I have an amazing support system of just believers in Christ, like, that I just could never even imagine having. And I have two very close friends that I share everything with. Like, we're just not ashamed, and we don't do shame stuff, because we know that that's how the enemy comes in. And we know that that's where you're bound to stay in a place of wherever you are. So I'm very open and honest with them about where I am. And I'm just very observant of myself. And I can honestly say to you that I have experienced a depressive episode, more than once, more than twice, more than 3 times since I wrote the book. And by that, a depressive episode is a time frame of 2 to 3 weeks where you're displaying depressive symptoms, whether that's, your appetite has gone up or down, or you're sleeping more or less, or you can't concentrate, you're irritable, things like that. And so I can recognize when that's happening, and I'm I'm not ashamed to admit when it is happening. And so I take the steps necessary, like, okay, well, Tara, you're going to have to, even if you just go for a walk, you need to get up out of the bed. And, even if you don't feel like talking, you need to talk to them. You need to call somebody. So I think those are like the number one things that I do to keep myself where I am.
That's dope. That's refreshing to hear, even down to you saying the support system. I think sometimes that's the part that makes people fall by the wayside a little bit, because you can get out of something and it's not necessarily someone asking you like, are you okay today? Da, 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 da. It's just more so, okay, if it's next month and I'm just having a bad day, I'm gonna need you. You know what I mean? And sometimes people think, oh, you got out of it, you don't need it anymore. And that is just not the case. And sometimes that's the scary part, is you don't want to be looked at as what people call having a victim mentality, but you also just want someone to say, hey, look, today was just very, very hard. And I can, and you can even identify why today was very, very hard. And I just need to vent it out, because if I hold it in, guess what? Tomorrow may be very, very hard. And then the next day, and then the next day, and the next day.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think in today's society, it's very hard to share that with other people, because we have developed a very selfish mentality here lately in the world as a whole. And it's all about, I can't take on what you're going through. Okay, cool. So what do you know, it's like, okay, if you can't take it on and you already know my story a little bit, what do? You know what I mean? And so that right there, I feel like for people that are listening, that is very hard to navigate through when you don't have a support system. So what are some tools you could share that to help them find that right support system, whether it's
yeah, definitely. So I never was the person to go looking for friends. I have been blessed enough to where the Lord, this is just the cards I was dealt. Some people, they have a lot of money. Some people, they just, find the love of their life very early, but I can honestly say that the Lord blessed me with friends in all stages of my life. So when I was a child, when I was in middle school, when I was in high school, when I was in undergrad, even like with the lifestyle I was living. And then he already had, amazing women and men of God that are just like me, down to earth, but just are on fire for Christ. And so that was just kind of there. But I can tell a person what to look for, because if you're really, one, serious about protecting your, mental health, but two, if you're serious, if you're wanting to walk with Christ, and if you are somebody that is dealing with mental health struggles, you definitely want to get you some friends that pray. You would be doing yourself a disservice to have people just to talk to. And again, I know that this might not be the same for everybody, but I think that, I'm sharing from my perspective, and what I've known to be true is that there are just some things that just like you can't pray everything away. There are some things that really require prayer. That it's just like, it's not just a matter of talking about it. Like, to be honest with you, there came a certain point where the Lord told me to keep my mouth shut. Like, he told me to hush my mouth and be mindful of what comes out of it, because there's life and death in the power of the tongue. The word talks about that. And so you definitely want to look for friends that pray. They have a prayer life. I think what's interesting about what you said, you do want friends that are willing to carry some of your load. I think we are responsible for our own load, but even a lot of people don't talk about this. Even Jesus had somebody help him carry the cross. Like they don't know that part. I didn't even know that until I read it, but there was actually a man that had to help Jesus carry his cross at a certain point. Yeah. And so it's like, I believe that was just such a beautiful picture. Now, Jesus was very full aware of his assignment, fully aware of what he had to do and carry out. But at a certain point, he needed help. And so, I mean, you're responsible for your own healing. You're responsible for your own freedom at the end of the day. But we were never meant to do life alone. And so community is very necessary. So you definitely want to look for someone that is willing to take on those moments when you cannot pull yourself out. Like you can't see yourself, you can no longer see yourself how you really are anymore. And that's where I was. I couldn't see Tari anymore. I couldn't see the beauty in Tari inside and out. I didn't know what that looked like. So that's another thing. And friends that are just, they have grace for you, but they'll also hold you accountable. And I think that was so uniquely put together in my friendships, where there's this perfect balance, like where they know to hold me accountable, they know to show me grace, and likewise, with me for them. So what this looks like is they're not coddling me so much as they're wanting me to be free, or they're wanting me to outlive the potential that God has put on the inside of me. It can be very tricky. I think it can be very tricky. It's so much more than just, you want somebody to listen. Like those are great things. Those are great things, but it can honestly sometimes be detrimental when that person is just listening. Sometimes you need to be told what the truth is beyond the voices that you're hearing,
That's it.
Yeah.
That is
I was actually gonna ask, like, what are some things as the friend, like, how should they be responding? Like, what are those things? Because I mean, some people just don't know. Like, they're like, okay, I'm here if you ever need to talk, but is this a moment where I need to be just listening, or should I be giving back information?
Yeah.
So what are some of those things that as the friend you could do?
Yeah. So if you're speaking from if somebody's like having a hard time, is that what you're? Yeah. So what I've learned, and this is from what I know that I needed, but also what I've learned as a friend, is just to ask them what they want first. So even in my friendships, my friends, we go through tough things and they might need to, vent or whatever. And I'll ask them, do you want me to just listen right now, or do you want to hear what I have to say about it? And I'll let that kind of lead the way. Now, me personally, like my friends, we have this thing where we call it a quick comeback. Like we don't let the enemy beat up on us too long. Like, especially if there's something that has just happened, we don't let each other stay in that place for too long. And that's just what works for us though. And so I can't, I don't want anyone to ever come off so abrasive to where you're just like, well, I hear you, but let's focus on, moving forward, because that can be insensitive. But I definitely think that if you're coming from a natural perspective, just asking them what they want in that moment. And 9 times out of 10, I mean, that's pretty much that's the only thing that you can do. And it can be hard sometimes when you want to tell them, like, listen, you don't need to feel like this. You don't need to be doing it, but they might really just need somebody to listen in that moment, So it goes both ways. Yeah.
It does. I mean, but it also, as you're growing, like you said, you're responsible for your healing and your happiness and your emotional well-being. It also is up to the person of, okay, look, this is what I'm dealing with. B, like you said, kind of guide the conversation. Hey, I just need to vent it. And then maybe give me some constructive feedback of what I could do differently. But I think that goes along with that person's healing process. And sometimes, I mean, I remember just being in the midst of my struggle, and I was just always complaining. You just felt like, well, to me, I felt like it was complaining to others, but really it was my life. And to me, I was like, okay, what you said, God told you just shut your mouth. And I was just like, all right, you know what? I ain't doing it no more. Cause it was, to me, it was tiring, you know? And then it came to the friends that would just be like, hey, what's going on today? What's going on in your head? And then I'll be like, oh, wait a minute, I ain't said nothing. I ain't reach out. I didn't do it. So I'm like, this is a divine intervention happening on my behalf. Because obviously, if you know your personality, you know, if you're an inward person, God will find ways or send people to bring you out of that. Because you know, if you fester in it too long, it can blow up mentally. It can blow up. And so I started asking God for the right divine people to be in my life during certain struggles. Because at first I would just be like, God, I need people to talk to. And it wasn't clicking. And then it was like, no, ask for the right people to talk to.
Yeah.
And that way you will know when they knock at your door, is more me sending them versus you looking for them.
Right.
Searching for them. And so that was a key thing, was just stop asking for people, ask for the right people.
I definitely agree with that.
That was a turning point from myself.
Yeah, I agree.
I did want to ask or get you to talk a little bit about your book, as far as, because, you know, a lot of people may be thinking like, well, how did she know to write a book and put this, you know, in book form to like even share to anybody? So can you tell us, like, you don't have to go into detail if you don't want, but just like your process of how you turned this into a book. Like, what made you decide to take your journal entries and put it in a book?
Yeah. I kind of had this knowing. So like, I feel like my story is kind of separated into two phases, if you will, where there was a phase where I was like fighting for my life. And then there was a phase where I had attempted to end my life. So both of these look different. And when I was fighting for my life, I had an unction that I was going to end up writing a book. But I thought that the book was going to be about, you know, enduring suicidal ideation. I didn't think that it was going to actually be walking through suicide attempts and life after. So it wasn't me. It wasn't me. Like, it was definitely God. Like honestly, if we're just speaking practically, nobody in their natural mind would be so forward about sharing a story that is so disturbing. Nobody would be. So I know it was God. And even, you know, some of my journal entries, like, they start off when I was in undergrad. And at this time, I wasn't necessarily suicidal, but I was depressed and I didn't know it. So I was using different things to cope, which to the average person would have seemed like normal college life, you know, drinking, sex, like, but for me, I didn't feel right. Like, I almost felt like I had to have those things to be okay. And I'm very open about that in the book. Like, this is what kept me going. And it was not what God wanted for me. It's not what God wants for anybody. So all that to say, those journal entries, I just had a knowing that one day they wouldn't just be in my journal. I just knew. And then during the peak of everything, it was actually my mom that confirmed. The Lord used her. Now, she didn't come to me and say, the Lord told me, no, because that's not always how it works either. Like, you know, a lot of times when God is using a person to speak into your life and it's him, they're not going to preface it by saying, the Lord told me to tell you. But I know that he did use my mom, because this was when a lot of things hit the fan. It was 2017. This was when I was actively self-harming. I was very suicidal. And this was when the relationship that I was in started to crumble. The first time it started to crumble, and I was deeply distraught. And I had actually came down to visit one of my close friends. And at the time, you know, I told my mom, hey, I'm in town. I don't want you to worry. I said, I just need you to trust me that I'm okay. And I wasn't okay, but I wasn't in a place to talk to my mom at that point. But eventually I did. And I shared with her where I was and how deeply hurt I was by the ending or the beginning of the ending of the relationship at that time. And I remember she said to me, you know, I could see you writing a book. And at this point, I was already somewhat settled in the fact that I was going to write a book, but I didn't know that it was going to be this. Like, I just kind of had the idea in my head, like, oh, I guess that would be, you know, helpful for the world. But I had more confirmation as I kept walking that, like, yeah, you're going to end up writing a book. You're going to share your story. And it wasn't anything that necessarily I wanted to do. It was definitely something that God pushed me to do. So, yeah.
Nice.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Where can we find your book?
So you can find it on my website, taricox.com. Amazon also has it, but I prefer that anyone would purchase through my website because one, I package them myself that way and I sign them and I pray over every copy. But if you are finding yourself itching to read it so fast, you know, Prime will get it to you quicker. But I do ship very fast. So I prefer that any interested readers purchase it at taricox.com.
Is there anything that you're working on as of now that you would like to share to the world?
Nothing that I like to share.
Okay.
Nothing that I like to share. No, God, he's doing some stuff.
I believe
so I will tell you this though. People, they see the oil, but they don't see what goes on behind it. And so I can honestly say you're not talking with or looking at somebody that's just, oh, you know, yeah, she went through her testimony and life is great. No, I mean, I've had to literally like go through a lot of things that I didn't think I would have to go through after walking through something so devastating. But I've learned so much about myself. I've gotten so incredibly close to God. Like I wouldn't trade where I am for anything. Like I wouldn't. And it's a lot of stuff in my life that does not make sense right now. To be honest with you, it really doesn't. But I know that God is like my relationship, my intimacy with the Lord. I wouldn't trade it for nothing. Now, would I say that I'll go through it all again? I'm not there. I can't say that. But I can definitely say though, it was worth it. It was worth it. It was worth it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Toya, do you have any more questions?
Do you want to give them your social? I don't have any more questions, but do you want to give them your social media, Tara?
Yeah, sure.
Instagram or whatever?
Yeah, so my Instagram is at XARCITO. Again, that's XARCITO. A lot of people are like, what does that mean? I'm like, it's just my first and last name scrambled together. they're like, what does that mean? How do you say it? I'm like, however you want to say it.
That's hilarious because for some reason, I was thinking it was like something else, but I was thinking it was your middle name, but that's not your middle name because now I remembered your middle name. So I'm like, that's that's funny.
Yeah. So that is my social media.
She posts some really good content, y'all. She posts really, really good content. So make sure you check her out. Make sure you go get her book from taricox.com. We're not gonna buy from Amazon. I'm just playing.
Yeah, no, I almost didn't even.
But go to Tari Cox so she can, you know, pray over it and maybe write you a little note or whatever. Make it personal.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else, Lex, before I close?
No, ma'am.
No. You got anything else, Tari?
I think that's all.
That's it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, if you are watching this video, I guess you are watching it on the I'm Just Me page. But if you are listening to this video, if you are listening to this audio, you can watch it on our YouTube page at I'm Just Me. At I'm Just Me is EYMJUSME. And then if you are, I guess, watching it, you can listen to it at any of your podcast platforms. Real Talk Podcast. No. Real Talk, REALTLK. Our Instagram is Real Talk Podcast. That's REALTLK Podcast. And you can go over there and let us know what you think about this great conversation that we had about mental health and mental illness. And we pray that it helped somebody. We pretty sure it helped somebody, somebody. If it was just us two, it helped us.
It helped me.
Definitely. And that's all I have. Tari, thank you so much for coming, hanging out with us, and we will
for having me.
You're welcome, and we will talk to you guys later. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Real Talk with Toya, Lex, and Chris. We'll talk to you soon.